Hi, and welcome to the Reclamation Project podcast. We are so glad that you're here, that you're listening, and hopefully that you are part of the conversation. This discussion that we are having hopefully isn't just recorded words. Hopefully it isn't something that is just something that you listen to, but hopefully it's something that impacts you, that helps you, that these things that we are discussing are things that you can put into action in your own life and hopefully help you through whatever struggles and circumstances you may be going through. Today we're going to look at an often misconstrued, distorted, abused terms, and that term is love. Love is a term that has been highly influenced and even to a certain extent hijacked by society, by our culture, by entertainment, by a lot of things that influence who we are. Growing up, I was a huge fan, and I am not too proud to say this, of chick flicks. And I love chick flicks. It was when I was a teenager.
That explains a lot, actually, to someone who's known you for a while. But go ahead. Continue.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say as a teenager, but you know what? As an adult, too.
Yeah.
I will say, even to this day, I'm a big fan of chick flicks. I just love them. I love the aspect of thinking about, just love and seeing two people fall in love and two people come together and realize their potential and realize how they were meant to be. But often chick flicks kind of distort, what love is. And they distorted it for me. That there was this concept of, oh, this is just going to happen so quickly and two people are going to come together and they're going to be in love and live happily ever after. I mean, just some of the mind-blowing, just horribly inaccurate views of how love comes about it resides in chick flicks. I mean, you look at like Serendipity. That's one of my most favorite movies ever. Anything with Kate Beckinsale is just amazing. Her and Rachel McAdams, amazing. But you look at Serendipity, and in Serendipity, she writes her number on a dollar bill and stuffs it in a book. And is that how it worked? I don't remember. She did something with a book and wrote her number down. And it was John Cusack's job to find it. And over years and years and years, their lives went separate ways. They became engaged to other people. And he kept looking for this book, and finally he really tries to find this book and goes to all these lengths to find it and finds her, and she's engaged, but you know what? That doesn't matter. We're going to end up together. And
true love prevails. Yes,
true love prevails, and they live happily ever after. And it's unrealistic, and the passion that comes with that, the yearning for each other that comes with that, it's not necessarily a realistic thing. Does it happen sometimes? Possibly, maybe not in that way. But
there are some good things that happen there too. Like even in every romantic chick flick, the same theme comes: boy meets girl, boy falls in love with girl, boy does something stupid, breaks up with girl, boy chases girl, wins girl over again. I mean, it does teach us a little bit of perseverance, and that you can work through hard things and still find love. I mean, depending on what angle you look at, I think that's the other reason we like chick flicks. It does give us some hope.
It does give us some hope, but there's also just unrealistic aspects of it. I mean, it gives you false hope to a certain extent.
Absolutely, yes.
I mean, you look at The Bachelor, and I will just preface this with, I think I've seen a full 5 minutes of The Bachelor ever, but the thought that there's however many girls, is it 25 girls that start and just they present themselves to this guy and they have to win him over, and there has to be a connection, and then that person, that one last person that's left that they've dwindled their way down to, that is the person that they're going to marry. And you look at that, and there's a false sense of love. There's a distorted sense of love, is that love is something that can be won, first of all. Yeah. It's something that can be obtained. It's something that you have all these different choices of who you can love and who you can't. And you're going to find that person through a rose ceremony.
I always wondered what they thought of after he chose the lucky girl. and they're engaged, and they're sitting there watching their episodes, and she's cuddled up next to him on the couch watching him make out with 24 other girls. I always wondered, what was the next thing we didn't see?
Exactly. It's distorted. It's presented in a way with an agenda that kind of emits and requires an emotional reaction from you, the viewer, and it's not real. It's not real. I mean, you look at all the celebrity couples too that are around, and what you see in TMZ and in the tabloids and in their shows or in whatever aspect that they perform in, what you think about that person isn't truly who they are, 7 days a week. They are a completely different person. They can portray a nice person, a giving person, and be the total polar opposite when you meet them in person. And there's a false sense there of who they are, and they're portraying something that they want you to feel, and that's a lot how love has changed over the years. Is however they've presented it, it's kind of swayed us to think of what love is and what love isn't.
Like they get to determine the new norm of love. Actually, it's kind of morphed into culture have said there's really no such thing as everlasting love. It's learning how to just love in the moment. So they've even morphed the chick flicks. We're happy ever after only means until I get tired or we lose our connection. That's kind of what it's morphed into.
So the question is now that we've had this misconstrued, distorted view of love, what is love?
Well, society might define love, and before I start, I didn't get to throw my 2 bits into Sweet Home Alabama, best chick flick there is. Okay, I digress. They could say love is a feeling, love is an emotion, love is a spark, love is this electrical connection, and they all, that might be little pieces and elements of a true love thing, but I think love is an act of the will. I remember when I had a radio show a couple years ago, I interviewed this lady from India, and 2 ladies actually, and hers was an arranged marriage, the second one. She met her husband at the altar, and she goes, "Can you imagine the terrifying feeling I had as a 19-year-old girl walking up to be married to a man who I've never met before?" And she goes, "As you can imagine, the wedding night felt like an assault." She said, "It took me about 5 or 6 years before I really loved him, before I understood what love is." So again, she made a conscious choice. Love is an act of the will. She made a choice to love the guy. There was no magic. There was no spark. In fact, there was fear and anxiety and a little paranoia. Love is an act of the will. I think that's why when Jesus said, even the pagans can love people that are nice to them, but I'm asking you to love your enemies. That's not normal. That's a choice. So if I gauge love as my only definition by our culture, well, then I'm in a sense deluded and delusional when it comes to what my expectations of love is.
And love is a choice. It's something that we choose to give to people. It's something that we choose to be a part of. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to look at love, but we're going to look at it in the context of how we choose to love ourselves.
That one term right there would drove a lot of Baptists crazy, including myself. We were kind of taught that we shouldn't love ourselves. That's false pride and narcissism, and we're
boastful.
Not. It's pardon me?
It's boastful.
Oh yeah, it's boastful, and how arrogant to love yourself. But here's how important that is. Here's how strong that is as an influence in a human being. The Bible says in Proverbs that as a man thinks in his heart, so he is. It doesn't say how God thinks about you. It says how you think about you. So if I have self-loathing, imagine the kind of person I am. If I love myself, now let's define that. I'm not talking about arrogant narcissism. In fact, if you know the story, the Greek mythology of Narcissus, he was a hunter, and as he was, traipsing through the woods, he came across this pool, and he looked at himself in the reflection, and he just absolutely fell in love with himself. He was so enamored by the beauty of his self that he never left I've seen two different endings. One, he just sat there and stared at himself until he died, and the other was that as he tried to get a closer look at himself and his beauty, he sank and drowned, which probably is a good ending to a narcissist who are so self-focused. I'm not talking about, and I don't think we're referring to being self-centered, self-focused in that kind of self-love. It's appreciating who I am and my uniqueness of who God created me to be. I think that kind of self-love serves us correctly and serves us well.
And as we talk about the narcissist, narcissism is really a distortion of the word love. I mean, it's being so in love with yourself and you don't give it away, and you have this sense of who you are that's distorted, and no one can live up to that. No one can be around that. That's what narcissism is, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a love where you value yourself, but you also value yourself in an aspect of being able to choose to give it away and value another person. I don't know how many relationships I've seen over the years of friends that they don't value themselves in that relationship. They end up with somebody who doesn't value them either. They're feeding off of how they feel about themselves.
Correct.
And they're not valued. And that in some way morphs, down the line into almost a manipulative, an abusive relationship where when you're not valued and when you don't feel value and someone doesn't value you, there's no give and take of love. There's no give and take of sacrificial love, of giving away love.
Or even if you don't value yourself and someone tries to love you, you won't receive it. I mean, love is one of the 6 human needs that will be met. It finds a way to be met either positively or negatively. And that love is everyone has a need to love somebody and have it received, and to be loved and receive it. So if I have a terrible self-image and I don't love myself, I'm probably not going to receive the love a partner wants to give me. Now we're in marital counseling. And we're also talking about the flip side too. We're not talking about just someone who doesn't love themselves, but there are people that we know that love themselves way too much. Off the air, I was telling Jeremy about a client that I have, and he says this and laughs as he says it. He's a well-respected, extremely wealthy, nice-looking man, and he's on his 6th marriage. And he told me one time, partially in jest, and I think there was partially in truth, he said, "My big problem is I've yet to find a woman who loves me as much as I love myself." We're not talking about that kind of self-love. The kind of love we're talking about is the kind of self-love where you accept yourself for your uniqueness, your individuality, who you are. Ephesians 2 tells us that we are his handiwork. That means like we're uniquely crafted. There's something special and maybe one of a kind about who we are. We're talking about that kind of self-love.
For me, often I've had trouble accepting my uniqueness, accepting myself and who I am over the years. It's really taken its toll on me personally, because I never felt like I had enough worth. I never felt like even in the times where people may have said, "Oh, he thinks this way about himself and he's got it together." I never had it together at that point. I never accepted my uniqueness. I never accepted who I was. I always wanted to be something different. I think that's why I resonated so much with music and entertainment and movies, is because I was hoping that thing that they were was what I could become. And I immersed myself in that to find comfort in that, because I wanted to be what they were singing about, and I often morphed myself into those characteristics.
So instead of being unique, you kind of were playing roles.
Exactly. I mean, I was playing roles. I was trying to find my place rather than seeing my place and diving into that. I was trying to be in someone else's.
But isn't it true, like you could play a bunch of roles, but at night when you crawl into bed and you're all alone, you really know who you are?
Yeah, you do, and you have to accept that. I mean, you have to, we've talked about purpose and fulfillment and contentment. You have to know what your purpose is. You have to know how you've been uniquely built and wired, and the circumstances that you are in that help you convey your purpose to other people, and how to utilize that purpose, you have to accept that. If not, you're playing this role of someone else who is not you, and there's no fulfillment in there. That there's no growth in that. There's no contentment in that. You're constantly looking for something else that will fulfill you until you realize who you are and what you.
And you're looking for something to fulfill you that's not really you. You're actually looking for something that help your role be better facilitated. That's where we've talked about a couple of times is reframing comes into play, that if I can look at my uniqueness as something negative, or I can turn around and say my uniqueness makes me special, therefore, the positive. I was listening to a Hawaiian pastor, actually. He was on TV, and he was telling a story about a boy. He had him stand up in the crowd as one of a young men in his church, high school football stud, got in a car accident, lost his left arm. And first thing he said when he got out is he goes, I need to be physical. I need to be in sports. So he asked his dad to take him to martial artists, and one martial artist took him under his wing and taught him. The cool part of the story, they had the sensei on there as well, and he talked about how he taught this kid 4 months every day, one move until he perfected that move. He said that here's where his uniqueness came in. His sensei entered him in a tournament, and the kid said, "What tournament?" He said, I only know one move, and I have one arm." He said, "Trust me." So it's almost like a real life Karate Kid thing.
I was going to say, it sounds like you're talking about Danielson.
Yeah, Danielson, and no, but it's almost like that. That's probably why I was listening to the story. In the process, he told the Indian he came to the end where he was moved himself up the tournament, and he kept in between matches. He asked his sensei, "I don't understand this." He goes, "Well, it's really easy. The one move is the best move to do, and the only counterattack to this move is to grab the opponent by the left arm. You do not have a left arm." So in that uniqueness, there was something special, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about. Let's reframe our uniqueness and appreciate it, accept it, enjoy it, even, do we say, love it? That's the kind of self-love I think we're referring to.
And beyond acceptance, there's I think there's a concept of forgiving yourself. Forgiving yourself for your missteps, forgiving yourself for where you haven't accepted those things, forgiving yourself when you've gone out of character and out of who you are supposed to be, and you've chased other things, and it hasn't worked out. Forgiving yourself when you've hurt other people. I mean, that's huge, is being able to forgive yourself for hurting other people. But not only that, for hurting yourself. We need to learn how to forgive and how to move past the past. That's been a big one for me over the years.
What's that look like?
Well, I mean, for me, I like I said, I chased these roles, and I became people I wasn't, and that really hurt others. It hurt myself, and it really distorted my views on different things. And what I had to, I'm a person who I feel very deeply when I've hurt people, when I've hurt myself. I fester on it. I delve into it. I have a hard time letting go of it. And what I've had to learn over the years is that you have to let the past be the past and forgive yourself for that and move forward. Because if you're constantly holding on to the past, you're bringing that with you. You're almost dragging it with you into the future. And when you drag it with you into the future, it slows you down. It prevents you from being able to reach the goals that you have currently, and it's baggage.
And it's really the cultural definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and hope for a different result. You keep living under the roles. We can't anticipate or expect a different ending, because if you do what you always did, you get what you always got, and that's where you find yourself without forgiving yourself. That could be a painful thing. Did you ever experience a moment like when you mentioned about forgiving yourself? How did you work through that?
It took a long time, first of all.
Yeah.
I'm still, I would say I still work through it from time to time, because I'm reminded of things, and really working through it was coming to a point where I said, you know what, I have to move on. You know, I love a post that you actually put up the other day, where it says, is on Instagram, and you said, "Dear past, thank you for your lessons. Dear future, I'm ready. Dear God, thank you for another chance." I was like, if that would have been spoken to me a couple years ago, you know, it wouldn't have resonated as much. Well, it wouldn't have resonated as much, but,
Right.
but seeing it today, it's like, man, I've been through that, you know, where I have to let you go. I'm ready for the future. I'm, you know, ready for another chance. And, you know, while I haven't made amends with people or situations necessarily, I've had to let them go because there may be no amends to make.
And it's interesting when you look back, instead of just dismissing the past, I now take power over it because you've learned. So that's what the first part of that quote was. Thank you for the lessons. Some things we learned only because of that. So I extract the good from that and get rid of the rest of the junk that came with it.
Well, and this podcast is, you know, this particular podcast that we're recording right now, it is evidence of that because I've learned from it, and now I'm talking about it.
Yeah.
You know, because I have that experience, and hopefully that experience helps someone else who may be dwelling in those same things that I was dwelling in to say, you know what, I got to cut the cord. Got to let go of it.
In a sense, that is a piece of loving yourself. So you're secure enough in yourself to talk about it now and maybe help somebody else. That's a form of loving yourself.
Yeah,
that security that you have in your identity that now I can even talk about my silliness because it may help someone else.
Well, not only that, it's realizing, okay, and we talked about this, is my purpose, I feel, is helping others become better versions of themselves. A lot of times for me, that is trying to help people not go through the crap that I went through and not make the same mistakes that I've made, and leaning on my experience and my shortcomings to help them, you know, not do those things, not go through that pain that I've gone through, and hopefully thrive instead of, you know, mess up like I have.
And it's such a weird dichotomy because it's partially because of that pain you learn these lessons. So there comes a fine line of how much pain I let someone go through and how much pain I try to, like if I would tell my grandson, you know, stop pulling the dog's ear, she's going to nip at you, I'll let the dog nip. But if I see him getting ready to put his hand on the stove, I'm not going to let him experience that pain. So there's certain pain you have to let people walk through, because that's going to be their greatest teacher. But you don't want to go through the full Monty of pain that we've been through, because with that pain comes consequences.
Yeah, and those consequences sometimes are dire, and so you don't want people to walk through those same consequences, and those same things that maybe sidelined you for years.
Yeah,
you know, but you want others to experience, you know, the understanding of what could happen, and hopefully move on without having to go through as much as you did.
That's a great point.
And part of turning that corner for me was not only accepting who I am and forgiving myself for those things, but also having a humble confidence. Humble being the key word there.
Correct.
A humble confidence
of
knowing my purpose and knowing I can be used. And continually kind of affirming myself in that.
You know, that's such a good point. What I give a lot of my clients are these affirmation exercises. And there might have been a day where I thought, well, affirming yourself is really like hand in hand with narcissists, but it's really not. I do have to affirm myself in my uniqueness. In fact, it's a great word study if you get in Scripture and find out all the things God calls you, that you're a child, you're a son, you're a chosen generation, you're part of the vine, you're totally accepted, you're forgiven. I mean, those are great reminders to have. And at the end of all those reminders, I have to think, how could I not love myself if the Creator who made me and died for me loves me? That almost seems like an ungrateful position to take.
Knowing your worth and knowing your value to God and just in general is just huge. And having that humble confidence is huge in being able to move and to breathe and to grow in this life and in your purpose and in who you are as a human, as a person. So it's huge to be able to identify that, to be able to affirm that, to be able to consistently day in and day out know that you have the value, that you have the worth, that you are someone who has value.
Which is really why we chose this first topic in the context of love underneath the umbrella of happiness, that in the areas we're going to go over the next couple of podcasts when we talk about love, this self-love has to be foundational. It sets the course for how you love others. It's going to set the course for how you love God. And that's why I think we chose this topic number one.
And there's a lot of people out there who struggle with this. It's something I've struggled with. But I would say to those people that despite the way you feel, despite the way that your circumstances make you feel, that you are loved, you are valued, you are desired, you have purpose, and you are unique in who you are, and you are going to be used in that unique spot where you are. Yep. So as we move to next week, I think our hope and our prayer is just that you would find the value in who you are, that the people around you, that the circumstances around you, that you would no longer let them get you down, that you wouldn't let your past continue to be that thing that you're dragging into the future, that you would be able to accept who you are, that you would be able to forgive any issues in the past, and that you'd be able to move on and continue to not just survive, as Switchfoot put it one time, that I wouldn't just survive, but that I would thrive. So if you're a person that's struggling with this, or you just want to continue the conversation with us, there's a couple places that you can do that. One is on our website, rppodcast.com. Also Facebook, at facebook.com/rppodcast. We have an Instagram. It is at rppodcast. And then also you can tweet us, direct message us on Twitter at twitter.com/the RP podcast. We hope that you have an incredible week and that you find your value and find your worth. Until next time, have a good one.